Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Nepal India border dispute. What has happened and how can it be resolved? Today, I would like to discuss an important and sensitive issue in Nepal India relations, the border dispute and the recent agreement between Nepal and India to map cross border occupation within 3 years. According to the recent report in the Kathmandu Post, senior survey officials of Nepal and India have agreed to complete the mapping of cross-border land occupation within 3 years. The agreement was reached during the 13th meeting of the Survey Officials Committee in Lucknow. Ladies and gentlemen, the two sides have also agreed to use unmanned aerial vehicles UAVs to assist the survey. This development is important because Nepal and India share a border of approximately 1880 kilometers across 27 districts. Over the decades, the courses of hundreds of rivers have changed, and this has caused land on one side of the boundary to appear on the other side. As a result, citizens of one country may sometimes be cultivating or residing on land that technically falls within the territory of the other country. Why exactly is cross border occupation, ladies and gentlemen? This point is extremely important. When we hear the word encouragement, we may immediately think that one country has deliberately captured the territory of another country. However, the current issue is more complicated. The Nepal India boundary in many riverine areas was established according to the fixed boundary principle. over time, rivers changed their courses. Consequently, land that was once on one side of a river would end up appearing on the other side. Therefore, a Nepali citizen may be cultivating land that, according to the boundary, falls on the Indian side, while an Indian citizen may similarly be occupying or cultivating land that technically falls on the Nepali side. The Foreign Ministry clarifies this point after Prime Minister Balendra Saha told Parliament in May that he had learned that India had encouraged on Nepali land, but that Nepal had also encouraged on Indian land in several places. The ministry clarifies that, ladies and gentlemen, the ministry clarified that the Prime Minister was referring primarily to across border occupation and land use, including situations involving the Das Gaza or no man's land, rather than making a territorial claim that Nepal had deliberately taken Indian territory. This distinction is crucial, dear brothers and sisters, Indian brothers, sisters, and Nepali brothers and sisters. What did Prime Minister Balendra Saha say? Prime Minister Saha's statement brought the issue into the spotlight, ladies and gentlemen. He stated in Parliament that after assuming office, he learned that not only had India encroached on Nepal's land, but Nepal had also encroached on Indian land at multiple places. His statement generated debate because it could initially be interpreted as an acknowledgement that Nepal had occupied Indian territory. However, the Foreign Ministry subsequently clarified that the statement concerned the technical reality of cross border land occupation. At the same time, Saha said that Nepal and India should discuss border related issues jointly and that the disputes involving Lipulek, Limpiadura, and Kalapani should be resolved through diplomatic dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a significant distinction. The technical issue of cross border occupation can be addressed through surveying and mapping, whereas the major territorial disputes require a much more sensitive political and diplomatic process. How will the 3 year mapping process work? Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen? The recent agreement provides a more systematic approach. The two countries will use UAVs, unmanned aerial, to capture aerial images of the affected areas. Those images will then be analyzed by technical teams. The objective is to establish a common understanding of where cross border occupation exists and how extensive it is. The joint survey is expected to begin after the monsoon season around September or October. This is important because decisions about the border should not be based merely on political statements, assumptions, or local perceptions. They should be based on verifiable evidence, accurate maps, GPS data, aerial imagery, and mutually accepted technical findings. The survey officials committee works under the Boundary Working Group (BWG), which is the main bilateral technical mechanism for border related work, excluding the Susta and Kalapani disputes, ladies and gentlemen. The BWG was established following an agreement during Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 2014 visit to Nepal. Its responsibilities include its responsibilities include clearing no man's land, constructing and repairing boundary pillars, updating records of cross-border property holdings, and conducting other technological border management activities. According to Nepal's Department of Survey, 8,554 boundary pillars have been installed along the border. However, 1,325 are missing, while 1,956 are partially or completely damaged. This demonstrates that the border problem is not simply a political disagreement, it also has a sustainable technical and administrative dimension. What about Susta and Kalapani, ladies and gentlemen? This is this is where we must distinguish between technical boundary management and territorial disputes. The current 3 year technical program does not cover the disputes involving Susta and Kalapani Limpiadura Libule. The BWG and SOC are not mandated to settle those disputes, ladies and gentlemen. These areas require political and diplomatic negotiations at a high level. Therefore, it would be accurate to say that the latest agreement has solved the entire Nepal India border dispute. It has not. What it has done is create a technical pathway for resolving a significant category of cross border occupation and boundary management problems. So, how can the border dispute be resolved? Ladies and gentlemen. So, how can the broader border dispute be resolved? First, Nepal and India need to strengthen technical cooperation. Yes, exactly. First, Nepal and India need to strengthen technical cooperation. Boundary disputes should be examined through modern surveying technology, GPS, satellite imagery, UAVs, historical maps, and field verification. The objective should be to establish facts before political conclusions are drawn. Second, both countries need to maintain continuous diplomatic engagement. Uh, Border dispute cannot be solved by emotional speeches, media statements, or public accusations alone, ladies and gentlemen. It requires sustained negotiations between governments. Third, Nepal needs strong and consistent diplomatic representation, ladies and gentlemen. This becomes particularly relevant because a recent Kathmandu Post report stated that ambassadorial positions in 21 countries are vacant or in transition, including important missions such as India, China, and the United States. The report noted that such vacancies can weaken Nepal's ability to pursue political, economic, and strategical interests abroad. Ladies and gentlemen, for a country dealing with sensitive geopolitical issues, institutional continuity matters enormously. Institutional continuity matters enormously, ladies and gentlemen. Further, Nepal should rely on evidence based diplomacy. Nepal should rely on evidence based diplomacy. Historical treaties, maps, survey records, river course changes, GPS measurements, and other documentary evidences should form the basis of negotiations. Finally, Nepal and India must understand that a border is not merely a line on a map. Millions of people live along this boundary. They have families, homes, businesses, cultural connections, and social relationships on both sides. Therefore, the objective should not simply be to draw a line. Therefore, the objective should not simply be to draw a line, ladies and gentlemen. The objective should be to establish a clear, mutually accepted, and sustainable boundary framework while protecting the legitimate rights and interests of people living along the border. The latest 3-year agreement is therefore a potentially important step forward. It introduces technology, joint surveys, and a defined time frame for addressing cross-border occupation. But it should be understood as one part of a much larger process. The most difficult territorial questions, particularly Susta and Kalapani, Limpiadura, Lipulek, still require high-level diplomatic dialogue. In the end, Nepal's most effective approach should be neither unnecessary confrontation nor passive acceptance, ladies and gentlemen. I speak again. I want to speak it again. Nepal's most effective approach should be neither unnecessary confrontation nor passive acceptance. It should be firm, evidence based, diplomatic, and consistent. Okay? A mature A mature foreign policy does not surrender national interests, nor does it turn every disagreement into hostility. Okay, a mature foreign policy does not surrender national interests, nor does it turn every disagreement into hostility. It protects sovereignty through facts, diplomacy, institutions, and sustained engagements. That is ultimately how Nepal and India can move from a dispute boundary towards a clearly demarcated, mutually respected, and peacefully managed boundary. Thank you so much. Again, that is ultimately how Nepal and India can move from a disputed boundary towards a clearly demarcated, mutually respected, and peacefully managed boundary. Thank you so much. Don't forget to leave your meaningful comment below at the comment section. Thank you so much.